Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third live webinar of the 6th edition of the PhD and Career Development MOOC. As of last year, some of our webinars are hosted in English, and so will be today's. So my name is Daphne. I'll be hosting tonight's webinar together with Virginie. Hi, Virginie.
Hi, Daphne. From the PhDOOC team, Sarah is also with us tonight, and she will manage the chat and relay your questions. We are very pleased to welcome Sarah Blackford tonight, who is a career strategist for PhDs with more than 25 years of experience. Good evening, Sarah, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Would you please introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, I am a PhD career specialist. I've been working in careers for over 25 years now, having started my career in research, moved into scientific publishing, and then done a bit of a sideways move. So yeah, I look forward to presenting this session to you this evening.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And many thanks as well to all of those who are attending this live webinar. Feel free to post your comments and your questions in the live chat on YouTube. The chat box is located to the right of your video, and you will need to be logged in with your Google or Gmail account to do this. We would also like to point out that there's a slight lag between the diffusion of this live on YouTube and the moment we're actually speaking. So therefore your questions may not be treated immediately. No worries though, we're on them. We would also like to mention that unfortunately we won't have time tonight to answer any general questions about the MOOC or the training platform. So if you have any, we refer you to the brand new help tab on the MOOC platform, as well as the Q&A and the discussion thread, which can be found there as well. And you can ask any question.
Coming back to the MOOC, in the first 2 units, you spent time understanding the job market and looking at your skills. The next step is to work on your career plan using the advice given by Sarah tonight and with the help of Unit 3 of the MOOC, which opens tomorrow. We would like to start this webinar by sharing the results of the Unit 2 survey. According to the poll, about 80% of you are able to name 3 skills acquired since the beginning of your PhD. Of these, 56% says they can also provide proof of these skills. You have already exchanged a lot about this in the MOOC forum.
Thank you, Virginie, for sharing this information with us. And that sounds great. We hope you all found these 2 first units useful and that you had some help in them. But right now we're going to get back to tonight. We will focus on the creation of a career development plan. And to start off, Sarah, would you mind sharing some key definitions with us?
So thank you all, Daphne and Benedict and Sarah, and giving me the opportunity to be with you this evening. This is a session on career planning, and I will just, first of all, I've got a slide of myself, but actually we've already done some introductions. I appreciate the fact that we're doing this session in English. I did do some French at school, and I'm currently trying to learn German because that's where I'm living right now, but obviously I feel very much more comfortable speaking in English. So I hope that you can follow me okay, and I will present the slides as follows. So what is career planning? You know, people talk about career planning all the time, don't they? But it can be a little bit daunting, can't it? And thinking, oh, you know, should I be planning my career, and should I know exactly what I need to do, and should I have goals and milestones and so on? And maybe you don't really know what you want to do. So let's just have a look at some definitions of career planning, because it is a bit of a contradiction in terms. So there are 2 major career theories that sort of, you know, reflect the fact that, you know, you can plan, and, you know, it's a very good thing to do, to think about what you want to do and be very positive, planful about your life, but there's also this unexpected part of your life, you know, the chance, the luck that people talk about, and how are you going to harness that? Because a lot of people talk in their careers about a turning point and how they happened to bump into somebody and it was a lucky break and it was by chance that they saw this opportunity. So when you combine these two together, I think that gives you a better idea of what career planning is, and it doesn't feel so scary. So let's have a look at the career planning part, this so-called DOTS model, which was presented in the 1970s. So it stood the test of time. And it's very simple. It shows you 4 different areas that you should think about when you're planning your career. Because a lot of people jump in and they say, oh, I've got my CV ready and I'm going to apply for jobs. But actually, they haven't really thought through things in great depth. So let's look at, first of all, self, because to me, self is the foundation for everything. Self-exploration, knowing yourself, thinking about, you know, things that you enjoy doing, who you are, where you come from, who's influenced you, you know, what's your social background, what's your personality, your skills, and so on. And it's something we don't tend to do very much of. We tend to be thinking about the work, the day-to-day, the actual projects that we're doing. We don't think about the researcher, we think about the research. So that's really important, not only to think about what career you might want to do according to yourself, but you could also be presented with kind of questions in an interview, for example, where they say, you know, tell me about yourself, or why do you want this job, or what interests you about this? And then you need to be able to reflect and think, you know, and understand yourself. And so, you know, this part I think is the most important. Obviously, knowing the job market beyond academia as well, and even within academia, people don't necessarily know what comes ahead of a PhD, you know, and how the position changes and what you need to do in order to secure an academic position. And of course, outside of academia, people are even more, you know, sort of in the dark a little bit about what kind of opportunities are out there. So if you don't know what opportunities you have and how to access them, it can really limit you in your career plan. And you can make decisions. People make decisions all the time, and you've made decisions. You made a decision to do a PhD. You made a decision to do your PhD in the subject that you've chosen and where you've chosen to do it, and the supervisor and so on. What are you going to do next? How are you going to base your decisions in the future? And it's all about making decisions that are informed, that are based on information that is true and factual, and from people who know what they're talking about, and then being able to make an action plan to take that forward. And then finally, selling yourself, which is what I was talking about earlier, where people, you know, they have a CV. Well, you know, you need a different CV for every single job that you apply for. You need to prepare for your interview. And above all now, in terms of your self-presentation, you've also got to think about your social presence. You know, we're all very visible online now. And, you know, when people apply for a job, the chances are the interviewer, the employer will look you up and will Google you. So you need to be showing yourself to be consistent. So these are the 4 key things that make up this career planning process. You can do all these things. But in the meantime, you know, life is happening around you. Life happens. And, you know, you never quite know what's going to take place. You know, it's a bit like if you think about, you know, buying a house, or what friends you have, or things that have happened to you in your life that have not been planned. You've just happened to be in a situation where, you know, you've found things that you weren't expecting to. And how do you find these things? Well, usually it's because you're out there. You're visible, you're looking around, you're engaging, you know, you're being a little bit curious about the world around you, not just drilling down and focusing on your PhD. You know, you want to look around, be a bit broader. Then you're brought into contact with things that are likely perhaps to be that kind of luck moment that people talk about. And that also is what they call in the planned happenstance risk, is what I would call coming out of your comfort zone, learning, doing something a bit different. So, you know, going to a conference and delivering a paper rather than a poster, or, you know, learning a new technique, meeting new people, doing something a bit different. And that then is a learning process, and it brings you into contact and puts you in a position where, you know, an unexpected moment, a luck moment might happen. Being flexible and adaptable is always going to be very important, not only in your everyday, but also to employers as well, who obviously need to adapt to whatever technology is coming along or what new things are being learned that will help them to get ahead of the field. And that's the same in academia as well, you know, when you're looking for funding and new avenues of research. And finally, being proactive and positive. So you've got to be in the driving seat of your career. Don't sit back and think, oh, my supervisor will find me some money, or I'll sit here and let the world happen to me. Be proactive as well. You know, just think about things that you can do that can help with your career, or, you know, anything that you think is interesting that could, you know, bring you new experiences. So that's the combination that is the kind of planned and the unplanned. So you've got that nice sort of very rigid, almost looking planned area, which is very, very important to pay attention to, but just being aware that things like networking, coming out of your comfort zone, being flexible and proactive will also enhance your chances of having some sort of positive experience. Okay, so let's just stop there and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm gonna check. No question for the moment. So if you're okay, we're gonna go on. And maybe you can now tell us how to prepare for the future.
Thanks, Virginie. Okay, let's continue. So how prepared do you feel? How ready are you now to move on in your next career transition? So, you know, when you finish your PhD and, you know, you get your qualification, you're moving forward, you know, are you going to stay in academia and do a postdoc, or are you going to come out and do something different? So, you know, just like an undergraduate, you know, you need to get your qualification within the university, just like that with a PhD as well, or you might be doing it in a research institute, but it's got to be affiliated, it's got to be accredited by a university, but it doesn't mean to say you have to stay there. So as a PhD graduate, where are you going to go next? So how prepared are you? So I'm going to give you this list of questions, right? So what I want you to do is just go through them, and you'll see it's a kind of traffic light system. So the first question is career choice. Okay, so how sure are you about what you want to do next? And how would you rate that? So would you rate it as a cross, which means that you are unprepared? Or would you say mainly orange, you're semi-prepared, you sort of kind of know what you want to do? Or are you feeling very positive about what you want to do? You're pretty sure about what you want to do. So are you red, orange, or green? Okay, so rate yourself for question number one. And I want you to do the same for the rest of the questions. So question number two, how well do you know yourself? Have you done self-audits? Do you feel that you understand yourself and your career motivations and your skills and your values and so on? Have you done any of that kind of self-evaluation? Number three is, what are you doing in terms of your career planning? Have you been doing anything? Have you been looking at your skills? Have you been examining the job market? Have you been preparing your CV? Anything like that that would help you to move forward in your career? And what is your knowledge of the job market? Do you know what's out there? What kind of careers are available to you? Are you networking? Networking is a very important part of career planning and finding a new position. So surveys show that something like 70% of jobs are acquired through networking. And then finally, you know, what's your career planning activity? You know, how often do you think about your career, you know, as opposed to your project, your PhD? Do you factor in time for that? So rate yourself with your traffic light system there. Okay, so I hope you've given you enough time to think about that. And then just think, have you answered mainly red or mainly orange or mainly green? So are you feeling unprepared, semi-prepared, or very prepared? So what I'd like you to do is just look at this matrix and position yourself where you think you would be in your career planning stage. So uncertain and inactive. So really, you haven't really done anything yet, and you've been focusing on your PhD, so you're unprepared. So that's nothing. That's nothing to be embarrassed about. I would have been there at your stage of career as well. Here is the green area where you have been doing stuff and you've been looking around and you kind of have a good idea about what you want to do, but you need to do a bit more. And coming on this PhD MOOC is a really good way of you to sort of really focus and finalize what you want to do in terms of your career plans. These two areas, the orange areas, are split into two. One where you are certain about what you want to do, but you haven't really done anything about it. So you're a bit self-limiting. Or you are uncertain of what you want to do in terms of your career, but you have been doing a bit of activity to help yourself, but you're not really sure what you want to do. So just think where you position yourself here, and that gives you an idea of how far you need to go now in terms of actions taken and certainty about your career goals, and moving further and further into this green area where you feel more prepared. So let's just have a look at the job market and see what kind of careers are out there that you could consider. So I've brainstormed and put these into categories just to give you some ideas. Academic research, and people think, oh, I'll stay in academic research, I'll do a postdoc. But there are different types of postdocs, and you can do them in universities, research institutes, government charities. You can even do a postdoctoral research position in a company. You need to know what kind of postdoc you want to do, and you may be able to apply for funding and do a research fellowship as well. So don't just think there are one type of postdoctoral position. Really, you need to examine that. And you can do research, as I said, outside of academia. And it isn't just within, the pharma industry or the scientific industry or these very obvious kind of research companies. There are other areas you can do research. You can do it in analytic companies, in education, in libraries, in government departments, think tanks, media. You can do it in large companies and small companies. We haven't got time to go into great detail, but it depends on your personality and the kind of position you want as to what kind of work environment might suit you and where you would want to do research. And you might be more of a people person who wants to be on the front line, and there's lots of these specialist services where you can be on a sort of more an advisory role and more of a sort of connecting, liaising role. Then people who like to apply their research, they don't want to just see the fruits of their labors as a publication in a scientific journal or a research journal. They would like to see some product, and so they would be more interested in commercializing things. Lots of people are interested in communication, but look, there's lots and lots of different types of communication you can do with research. You can get into publishing, or you can be a press officer or a journalist, or get into writing or medical communications or outreach to the public, policy work. There's so many different areas here. Teaching is connected to communication, but you can be teaching in a university is very different to teaching in a school or doing training like I do, or these guys here as being education technology specialists. And administration is across all sectors. And again, you could stay in a university or a research institute and move on to that side of things. And I'm sure people who do that kind of work in your institution who are PhD qualified, but then you can move into loads of different sectors, any sector that will offer project management, administration, and I've just listed a few here. Self-employment might come sooner or later to those entrepreneurial types amongst us. And then finally, something completely different. So, you know, if you are somebody who's more interested in your hobbies and your outside interests, maybe there are other things that you want to really move into. And here I've listed examples of people that I know who did a PhD and moved into these various areas. So, you know, really, when you're very highly qualified like you are, you have a lot of choices to make. You know, do you stay very close to what you know and very focused on your academic research? Or do you become broader and broader and broader and use those skills that we're talking about here today, you know, the transferable skills, the kind of expertise that you have, and move it into a completely different career sector? So how do you know which jobs are going to suit you? That's the question, isn't it? I splurge all these onto the slide, but you know, it's almost like you've got too many choices. So here, this is where we go back to the self again, and we think, okay, you know, what do I want to do with my life? You know, what do I enjoy doing? And this is a bit of a colourful slide here, but if you look at you in the middle, here you have your interests, and you know, interests are sort of connected with your research interests. For example, you know, you're interested in biology, or you're interested in research, teaching, programming, but also, you know, other things like sports or music, whatever. These are the things that are on the surface, you know, that people see on the outside when they say, oh, tell me about yourself. And, you know, when you meet people for the first time, you know, I'm a PhD researcher in biosciences, whatever it is. But underneath this, you also have your skills. So you're using your skills in order to create the data, to create the publications, you know, to run your life. And some of you will enjoy some of these, and some of you will, you know, prefer other things. And that will be the individuality of you as a person, as are your values, you know, the things that you find are very important to you. They're like your anchors in life, you know, that are really sort of, fundamental to the choices that you make. So when you look at a job and you think, I wouldn't really want to work in that company, that's your values talking to you. Or if it's a job where you think, you know, I don't really want a leadership role, I want to be able to use my creativity, you know, these are values again. And then your personality, of course, you know, which again underpins everything. So these are just 4 examples of the kind of self aspects that will influence you. So don't think, oh, you know, we're all PhD qualified, so how on earth is an employer going to discern between us all? But you're all very, very different. So, you know, the only thing you maybe have in common is your interests in this particular area of science, but all these other things will be different. So let's just focus on those skills and interests and, you know, investigate that a little bit more. And I want to just sort of draw your attention to the fact that when you're doing your PhD, you tend to kind of, you know, look at your specialist knowledge and your research methodologies and the productivity, like your publications, and building an international profile and teaching and research associated activities. But there's all these other skills that you're learning and using all the way through your PhD, all the way through your research. And you have been when you've been doing your undergrad and your master's and in your personal life as well. And so, you know, this again is all sort of building up to you as a person. So that self-exploration can be quite a difficult task, you know, to go back and really think about, well, you know, what exactly am I doing? And, you know, remembering all the things you have been, you know, taking part in and managing and doing your research, so many different aspects to what you do. And you can actually put these into a nice hexagon. So here, this is based on a career theory by John Holland, and functional is very much the work you do in the lab in creating the data, or you doing your research interviews or programming to make sense of the data. And, you know, you're answering a research question, so you obviously need to do a lot of investigative work. So this is all about hypothesis testing and understanding and investigating and really finding things out. Lots of people in science, as I said, are interested in communication. They like the delivery of science in a more inspiring way, a more visual or a more creative way. So that's the artistic side of what you're doing. Then you've got the social side, which is more around advising and interacting with people and students and teaching and helping and empathy. It's the kind of thing that I'm doing now. You know, it's that side of the sort of activity, the professional activity that you do. Enterprising is about the entrepreneurial side, about, you know, persuading, trying to get money, trying to get people interested in what you're doing. And your professor, your research group leader would have to do this when they're applying for funding. But if you moved out of the academic sector, you know, into a startup, then you might be involved in that too. And then finally, management, because everyone has to manage themselves and their career and their everyday. Some people like to have it as a really big core part of their job. So what you do is thinking about your PhD and looking at all those different subsections to it, you know, the practical side, and then thinking about the research and turning it into something a bit more creative, being more social and people interacting, being quite entrepreneurial or managerial. And then thinking, well, what areas do you enjoy doing? Because the point about thinking about your career and thinking about your career plan is to take forward the things you like doing and to leave behind the things you don't like doing. So you don't want, you know, something that you don't like doing to be 80% of your job. What you want it to be is about 10%, because we all have to do a little bit of what we don't enjoy. So looking at those 6 categories, I'll just stop for a couple of seconds now and ask you to identify, you know, your top 3 categories. What would you say would be your 3 categories? What order would you put them in from 1 to 6? So that's a personal activity for you, and I'll go back to the team now and ask them if there's any questions that have popped into the chat box while I've been presenting.
I believe that for now there are no questions.
Okay.
But you're talking a bit about self-exploration and all that kind of stuff, so I imagine you're going to elaborate a bit. We're very interested, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, well, look, hopefully you've had enough time to think about that. And you can always come back and watch the video again or take a screenshot. So let's just take that a bit further, because this is then, as I said before, you know, this self-exploration is linked into, you know, making decisions about your career. And this has implications because, look, I've taken that same hexagon, and what I've done is I've taken some of the jobs that I listed previously, and I've put them into these different sections. So you can see that, you know, obviously if you want to be a postdoctoral researcher, you'd be someone who is investigative, you know, or an academic, but, you know, journalists, data analysts, curators, they're all investigative people as well. The functional side, which is, you know, the actual getting the data, you know, through programming or being a specialist scientist or engineer, doing practical work. Some people really enjoy that side of it. And, you know, sometimes you think, well, if you really enjoy that side of it, probably being a group leader isn't necessarily what you want to do, because you'll have to leave that behind. When you look at your supervisor, you look at your group leader, they probably spend most of their time in their office writing grants and looking for new avenues of research funding, and they're writing papers, you know, and if you don't like writing, then perhaps that isn't for you. You know, maybe being a program manager or something along those lines, something that you can combine some of these together. Most jobs would combine at least 2 or 3 of these different sections. So for me, I would say, you know, social would be my top one, being a careers advisor and coach, but I'm quite artistic as well in what I do, and I'm very investigative. So I would say those 3 were the ones that I was most interested in. I do have to do a bit of management, and I don't really have to do much functional stuff. So I've left this side of the hexagon behind. Whereas when I first started my career, this was the big one. And then I moved into something that ended up being quite big in management. So I then jumped across into the social side. So, you know, don't feel fixated on being perfect in your career plan. You know, you can try things out. If they don't work out, you move on. And that's why people move around in their careers these days. It's, you know, something that we do, we test things out. But it's nice to know that with something like this, you can at least set off in vaguely the right direction. And this brings me to this Ikigai model. It's a sort of Japanese model where this central part is your ideal job. And what this model says is that it combines what you love to do with what you're good at. So you've got a passion for it. It's your mission in life, but you know, you want to be paid for it. And I know a lot of PhD students, you know, you will be doing sideline work. You know, maybe you're involved in organizing events, or, you know, you're doing some science communication or extra work teaching. But you know, in your next job, you might want to take that forward and get paid for it. The world needs it. So unfortunately, you know, for a lot of postdoctoral researchers, as you move forward in your career, you may be in your Ikigai, but your money runs out, and, you know, you need to think, how am I going to continue that somewhere else? And that's where the transition out of academia can be quite challenging. But if you know and you go with your eyes open, then it shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. So, you know, think about, you know, following your passion. Think about how you might improve the things that you're doing already so that you can move forward and remain employable throughout your career. I've just put this up. It's a bit busy, so I apologize for that, but it's adapted from Patton McMahon, another career theory career model. And this is things that influence your career. And this is you here. And we've only looked at skills. Today, I've mentioned values. I've mentioned the world of work and personality. But, you know, lots and lots of other things influence you. And one of the key things that can influence you is your peers, is your community, your supervisor, the workplace that you're in. And there's a kind of gravitational pull, in a way, you know, when you're working at university, that, you know, you want to stay there. And sometimes it can be quite hard to kind of break away from that. But, you know, you need to follow, you know, what you feel, your gut feeling, and think about your career planning and the happenstance of life. And be aware that, you know, these sort of more immovable objects can influence you as well. Politics and globalization, things that you don't have any control over. These are things we have more control over. And these lightning strikes are these planned happenstance moments, these chance moments, and these influences will change. So why you did a PhD or why you went to university, you know, what you see in here and around here, maybe you see different factors than what you see now. So when you look at that now, you know, what is it? It's your qualifications, you've got a PhD, great. So you've got your interests, which is in your particular field, physics, biology, chemistry, social sciences, whatever it might be. Then, you know, think about your skills that you want to move on, you want to use, and the sort of situation you want to be in, you know, what kind of work environment. So, you know, think about all those factors that are going to influence you and the decisions you make. So there are lots and lots of different factors. And as we know, you know, more and more permutations and combinations, it can be a bit overwhelming. But, you know, if once you start this exploration process and you start getting to know the world of work as well, and you know what's out there, it's really going to help you to make these informed decisions. And talking of which, let's go back to the career planning theory again and look at this action planning. So what can you do to enhance your employability? So that's what I said earlier, you know, it's not about being employed, and people search for these permanent positions. But I know people who've been in permanent positions and have been made redundant. So there is no such thing as a permanent job. What you need to do is think about your employability and, you know, how to keep yourself employable. And the more skilled you are, the higher level qualifications you have, you know, in this knowledge environment that we're in now, and technology moving us forward at a rate that, you know, we can hardly keep up with, then your kind of skills are the ones that companies, academic and non-academic, are looking for. And this man, this is the Nobel laureate, Sir Paul Nurse, who's the director of the Crick Institute in London. He actually says, you know, if you work too hard, you will keep going in the same direction. What he means is don't keep doing the same thing. Don't just focus on your PhD. Don't just keep doing those experiments and locking yourself away. Come out and think and expand your mind. That's what being a PhD student is all about. You know, it's about thinking, it's about investigation and having ideas. And if you do extra things like here, I'm saying that going from a PhD here, for example, to being a group leader, you do need to do the research work and generate data. But if you do all these other things as well, as you go along, you will expand your options. So you may or may not make it through to group leader. I know a lot of people who start a PhD or during that time or when they do a postdoc, they want to move to that position. But look at all these other jobs that you can do. And the more you know about the job market and about yourself and have a convincing CV, be strategic and keep yourself visible, join networks, try out new things, collaborate with people, have that kind of plan, happenstance attitude. It will open you up to a whole variety of jobs that you would never even have thought of. And there are very few people, if any, who've left academia who have regretted it. They found their niche, and you can still do research outside of academia. You can still publish. You can do many, many things. So keep your options open. Do what this PhD comics, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's very good at capturing this kind of message. So here it's you have the PhD student, the researcher in this office or in the lab with no windows, you know, busy doing their functional work and doing their PhD. And outside, there's all these exciting things happening that they're not aware of. So what I'm saying is open the window, put your head out the window and just look around, and it will expand your horizons. Okay, so I will leave it again to the team to let me know if there are any questions or comments at this stage.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We have a question from Sedala. What are the objective criteria for self-knowledge?
For self-knowledge, the objective criteria? Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure what's meant by that. The objective criteria.
Maybe do you have tools to share with us in order to better know you?
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, there are tools. I mean, there's the Science IDP, which is a self-analysis tool that can help you. We can put it in the chat box, and it's called the Science IDP, or Science My IDP, I think it's called. So that's quite useful because it looks at your skills, your personality, your values, and it sort of brings it all together. There's also something called Prospects Planner. And again, that is it's not a not-for-profit. It's just something for you to sort of look at, and you don't have to have definitive ideas about what you want to do. It's sort of giving you a scale, so that can help you. So I think, yeah, that's. You may also have I know some research institutes, some places do have their own. For example, I know that DKFZ in Heidelberg in Germany, they've created their own self-analysis tool. And in some places, you also have things like a learning log that you're asked to complete. So I hope that helps. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, I think. Thank you very much, Sarah. Maybe Daphne, yes. You want to share a question?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And effectively also in the unit that will open tomorrow, some of those tools will also come forward as throughout the MOOC. We had another question from Oyu Dagva, and he's asking, or she, I don't know actually, he or she is asking, how to improve awareness about our career options.
Well, that's a whole other workshop. Well, I think basically just go looking. You know, in my day, we used to look at the back of the New Scientist when it used to come out weekly, and we used to look at all the jobs. And it was really restrictive, obviously. But now you've got the whole of the internet. So you can start looking up a few things, investigating on LinkedIn or looking at job sites. And then that takes you somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. The thing I would say not to do, don't limit yourself to, you know, specific keywords. Don't think, oh, I want to be a project manager, so I'll put project manager in and that is it. Because, you know, a lot of the time companies use so many different job titles now. It's a good idea to sort of put in keywords like, you know, creativity or, you know, science management or something like that, that would sort of be more likely to come up in somebody's profile. And a lot of the time, if you search on people as opposed to jobs, especially in LinkedIn, so what I would do is go and look up, you know, creativity or science management into the search of people, and it comes up with people doing all sorts of different jobs. And then you can look at locations, you can look at their background, and then you can find small companies, because most of the companies that employ people nowadays are these small companies, what they call SMEs, small medium enterprises. And there are people that companies that nobody's heard of. What I find is that, you know, people are going for the obvious big companies, and they go to their websites or they go on Indeed.com or Glassdoor or wherever, and there's these adverts, and they focus on the advert and they forget that hundreds of people are looking at those adverts, and the competition is huge. So networking and looking at people, and maybe investigating alumni from your own institution and contacting them and networking and finding out from them what they do. And then when they find out about you, maybe they put you forward for a job. And that's how it all works. That's how that happenstance thing works. So if you have a sort of clearish idea about the job you want to do, so that's part of the career planning, then you use the happenstance part of it to find people, and then that can lead you towards jobs. And start early, because, you know, these things can happen before you finish your PhD. You don't have to think, well, I'm about to finish my PhD, let's start networking. Do it early, start early, because, you know, when you think of a spider building a web, they don't do it when they see the fly. They get themselves organized and ready, and then the fly comes along. And that's what you need to do, is to prepare yourself for when you want to capture that job.
Thank you, Sarah. We want to share with you that several participants have shared their top 3 categories. It's nice.
Oh, great.
And they all have in common the investigative part of the hexagon. No surprise.
It's not a surprise, is it? Because, you know, you've chosen to do a PhD, you've gone down that research path, as opposed to your peers when you were a student at university, when you were doing your degree, and lots of people went off to do other jobs, and you decided to carry on doing a PhD. But don't dismiss those people, because you never know, you might end up working with them in the future and your paths will cross again. But yeah, the investigative side is, I think, the key. And not everyone enjoys the functional side. Some people just they like the ideas. They don't actually want to do that side. Other people really like it and want to carry that on. And so yeah, you're all different, and you all have different career pathways ahead of you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Unfortunately, we have to stop for tonight. Thank you very much, Sarah, for this amazing presentation and for all the pieces of advice that you gave us. Thank you, Sarah, for managing the chat. Thank you, Daphne, for hosting this webinar, and many thanks to all the participants this evening.
Thank you, Virginie. So short note, next week on Tuesday, February 1st, there will be another webinar. This one will be in French, and it will be at 7 p.m. Paris time. We will then discuss more deeply the exploration of the job market with Claudine Pierrot from the APEC, something we already got a little bit into tonight, but we'll get much deeper into it next week. In the meantime, we will stay in touch on the forum discussions and in the collaborative documents that you can find on the MOOC platform. Once again, Unit 3 will open tomorrow, and it will give you the opportunity to make or improve your own career plan using all the advice Sarah gave you tonight. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for being here, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, once again.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Bonsoir. Bonne soirée.